Hello everybody, look at our view. That's the ocean with clouds over it. Okay, we're gonna read Evelyn Underhill's book from 1910, but it could be written in like 2040, because it's so good. It's called Mysticism, Studying the Nature and Development of Spiritual Consciousness. It's so amazing. I have an hour, so let's get started. All right, I have this set up. Let's have you looking at the ocean. Let's see if anything passes. Here, I'll do it higher. There we go. All right, let's get started. Welcome. Evelyn Underhill influenced the Inklings, Charles Williams, and she corresponded with C.S. Lewis, told him his idea of God was not wild enough, and then he came up with Aslan a few years after that. Such a beautiful sunny day. I wanted to get up where we could see the ocean. I didn't know if it was cloudy or not. Look at that, expansive. Here we go. Welcome if you're listening to this on the podcast. I turned it into a podcast too so that other audience people could get it. You know, a different kind of people listens to those. But if you want to see the ocean while I'm listening and while I'm talking, I've been a psychologist for over 20 years, so sometimes I interject. I also have had lots of mystic experiences, but I want her to explain it, you know. Sometimes I get tired of saying my own stuff, but if it helps, and I don't always know, I just do my best. All right, let's start. We're on the second half of this book right now, but you can start here. Trust that this got to you. Look, aloha means love, right? Aloha, the Aramaic word for God is alaha, right? Which is, some mystic person explained it to me like is like the all, you know, the absolute infinite beingness. It's kind of like the all that's loving always embraces us. That's my translation of what he said, but anyway, I love the word alaha and aloha. Okay, so we're on, this part says introversion. We're talking about contemplation, and there's some people that are introverted, and that's their approach. And all of us, you know, have a mix of extroversion and introversion, just like we have the active and the passive, you know, like Mary and Martha were representing like the yin and the yang, you know, action and contemplation. But let's get back into this. So here's a quote from Angela de Fulgenio. And I beheld love, And I beheld love advancing gently towards me, and I beheld the beginning, but not the end. Unto me there seemed only a continuation, and eternity thereof. So that I can describe neither likeness nor color, but immediately that this love reached me, I did behold all these things more clearly with the eyes of the soul than I could do with the eyes of the body. This love came towards me after the manner of a sickle. Not that there was any actual immeasurable likeness, but when first it appeared unto me, it did not give itself unto me in such abundance as I expected, but part of it was withdrawn. Therefore do I say, after the manner of a sickle. Then I was filled with love and inestimable satiety, you know, satiation, fullness. That's the end of the quote. Oh, it is to Mathilde of Magdeburg, whose contemplation was emphatically of the intimate type, that we owe the most perfect definition of this communion of the mystic with his friend, with a capital F. I hope I said, the study, Mysticism, studying the nature and development of spiritual consciousness. So she was Anglican, but I welcome all religions, and so would she. She's quoting from all these different sources, but she does it in a way that's still respecting the integrity of her own faith path. It seems like so far to me in all these 400 pages that we've gone through. You can go to the playlist on this and start at 1 after this video, Make sure to take a moment to like this and push the share button, because that, and write comments, if you will, because that makes this video go out to more people. Wherever you're listening to this, that increases the algorithm, because, and it makes other people look, because they're curious, because there's so many likes on this video. So I'd appreciate if you do that. It is to Mathilde of Magdeburg, whose contemplation was emphatically of the intimate type, that we owe the most perfect definition of this communion of the mystic with his friend, with a capital F. Orison, she says, draws the great God down into the small heart. It drives the hungry soul out to the full God. It brings together the two lovers, God and the soul, into a joyful room where they speak much of love. We have already seen that the doctrine of the Trinity makes it possible for Christian mystics, and still more for Christian mysticism as a whole, to reconcile this way of apprehending reality with the, quote, negative and impersonal perception of the ineffable one, with a capital O, the oneness, The absolute, which, quote, hath no image, end quote. Though they seem in their extreme forms to be so sharply opposed as to justify Eckhart's, she's always speaking of Meister Eckhart, because Eckhart totally wasn't around yet in 1910. But he got his name from Meister Eckhart. That's where he took it from. Meister Eckhart was in Cologne, Germany. Beautiful mystic writer. I'm going to read this sentence again. Though they seem in their extreme forms to be so sharply opposed as to justify Eckhart's celebrated distinction between the unknowable totality of the Godhead and the knowable personality of God, the quote, image, and the circle, are yet aspects of one thing. Instinctive monists as they are, all the mystics feel, and the German school in particular have expressed Dante's conviction that these two aspects of reality, these two planes of being, however widely they seem to differ, are one, capital O, right? Both are ways of describing that absolute truth, quote, present yet absent, near yet far, that triune fact de tre colori e de una continenza. It looks like three colors and one countenance, which is God. I think that's French. D? Yeah. Because it doesn't look like Spanish. Which is God. Both are necessary if we are to form any idea of the complete reality. As when two men go together to some undiscovered country, one will bring home news of its great spaces, its beauty of landscape, another of its geological formation or the flora and fauna that expresses its life. And both must be taken into account before any just estimate of the real country can be made. Since it is of the essence of the Christian religion to combine personal and metaphysical truth, a transcendent and immanent God, it is not surprising that we should find in Christianity a philosophic and theological basis for this paradox of the contemplative experience. Most often, though not always, the Christian mystic identifies the personal and intimate lover of the soul, of whose elusive presence he is so sharply aware, with the person of Christ, the unknowable and transcendent Godhead, with that eterna luce, is that eternal light? The undifferentiated one, in whom the trinity of persons is resumed. Temperamentally, most practical contemplatives lean to either one of the other of these apprehensions of reality, to a personal and immanental meeting in the, quote, ground of the soul, or to the austere joys of the knotted soul, N-A-U-G-H-T-E-D. She's talking about like a negative, aspect, like if you're looking at the negative of an old print, when we used to do film that way, where you could see the negatives and they would do this color photograph. Like sometimes it's in the absence you learn about God, and in the presence of the personality, and in the quiet and the dark, and in the light and the, all of these things. Wow, these clouds are so beautiful. Let me show you the sun real quick. Let's see where it is on here. I gotta lean it all the way back. Yeah, there it is. So pretty. Okay. Welcome, welcome. I welcome you so much here. I'm so glad you're here on this adventure with me, this mystic adventure. It's been so delightful. I'm so glad. I was just going to read this book myself, and I got the inclination or intuition to just share it with you, I'm so glad that was put in my heart to do so, and I followed it, So I keep hiking out here to this spot so we can have somewhere beautiful where I drive to the ocean so we can be closer to the ocean. And I was down there yesterday. I was about to say the name of the beach, but I don't ever tell where I am. My friend's here from out of town, so we went down there with her kids and one of mine. Anyway. Okay. Apprehending reality with the negative and impersonal perception of the ineffable one, the absolute which hath no image. Though they seem in their extreme forms to be so sharply opposed. Oh, I already read that. Hold on. Oh, the page switched. But that's so weird. Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay, the knotted soul, that's what we're talking about. Okay, the austere joys of the knotted, without soul. Not without your soul, but the dark. You go into the darkness and you see God from the absence of maybe all other perception. Abased before an impersonal transcendence which no language but that of negation can define. And some, however, both types of perception seem to exist together, and they speak alternatively of light and darkness, of the rapturous encounter with love, and of supreme self lost in the naked abyss, the desert of the essence of God. Ruysbroeck is a perfect example of this type of contemplative, and his works contain numerous and valuable passages descriptive of that synthetic experience. I think she's talking about not fake, synthetic, but synthesized, this mixture of the two, which resumes the personal and the transcendental aspects of the mystic fact. When we have become voyant, V-O-Y-A-N-T, he says, that is to say, when we have attained to spiritual lucidity, we are able to contemplate and enjoy the eternal coming of the bridegroom. And this is the second point on which I would speak. What, then, is this eternal coming of the bridegroom? Now, a lot of this is in St. John of the Cross's ascent of Mount Carmel and the living flame of love. Both of those are free online. And I'm sure people have put them on YouTube in a free version that's legal too. I don't like recommending ones that are illegal. This is legal because it's over 100 years old. We are able to contemplate enjoy the eternal coming of the bridegroom, and this is the second point on which I would speak. What then is this eternal coming of our bridegroom? It is a perpetual new birth and a perpetual new illumination. For the ground whence the light shines, and which is itself the light, is living and fruitful, and hence the manifestation of the eternal light is renewed without interruption in the most secret part of our souls. God be with every person here. Amen. Behold, all human works and active virtues are here transcended, for God discloses himself only at the apex of the soul. Here there is naught else but an eternal contemplation of and dwelling upon the light, by the light and in the light. And the coming of the bridegroom is so swift that he comes perpetually, and he dwells within us with his abysmal riches. And he returns to us, as it were, anew in his person, with such new radiance that he seems never to have come to us before, for his coming consists outside all time in an eternal now. In an eternal now, with capital E in eternal now. Always welcome with new desires and with new joys. Behold, the delights and joys which the bridegroom brings in his coming are fathomless and limitless, for they are himself. And this is why the eyes of the soul, by which the lover contemplates the bridegroom, are opened so widely that they can never close again. Now this active meeting and this loving embrace are in their essence, fruitive and unconditioned, for the infinite undifferentiation of the Godhead is so dark and so naked of all image that it conceals within itself all the divine qualities and works, all the properties of the persons, in the all-enfolding richness of the essential unity, and forms a divine fruition in the abyss of the ineffable one. And here there is an overpassing fruition of and an outflowing immersion in the nudity of pure being, where all the names of God and all manifestations and all divine knowledge, which are reflected in the mirror of divine truth, are absorbed into the ineffable simplicity, the absence of image and of knowledge. For in this limitless abyss of simplicity, all things are embraced in the bliss of fruition, but the abyss itself remains uncomprehended except by the essential unity. The persons and all that which lives in God must give place to this, for there is naught else here but an eternal rest, enwrapped, as it were, in the fruition of the immersion of love. And this is the being without image, that all interior souls have chosen above all other thing. This is the dim silence where all lovers lose themselves. Here, that was the end of quote. Here, Rosie Brooks, beginning with the symbol of the divine personality as bridegroom of the soul, which would have been congenial to the mind of St. Catherine of Siena, ends upon the summits of Christian metaphysics, with a description of the loving immersion of the self in that unconditioned one who transcends the persons of theology and beggars human speech. We seem to see him desperately clutching at words and similes which may, he hopes, give some hint of the soul's fruition of reality, with a capital R, its immeasurable difference in kind from the dreams and diagrams of anthropomorphic religion. His strange statements in respect of the divine abyss are on a par with those which I have already quoted from the works of those other contemplatives who, refusing to be led away by the emotional aspect of their experience, has striven to tell us, as they thought, not merely what they felt, but what they beheld. Rosie Brooks, great mystical genius, however, the depth and wholeness of his intuition of reality does not allow him to be satisfied with a merely spatial or metaphysical description of the Godhead. The active meeting and the love embrace are, he sees, an integral part of the true contemplative act, in the dim silence where lovers lose themselves. A person meets a person, and it is not the philosophic absolute, which all, quote, all interior souls have chosen above all other thing. We must now look more closely at the method by which the contemplative attains to his unique communion with the absolute life. The kind of activity which seems to him to characterize his mergence with reality. As we might expect, that activity, like its result, is of two kinds, personal and affirmative, impersonal and negative. Not negative like putting you down, like negative, of like the film. It is obvious that if you want to take deep breaths when I take them, I encourage you to do that. Or your own pace. It just reminds us to stay grounded in this, keep connected to the eternal, like the cross, the eternal and the ground. And horizontal is we're still in this reality, loving others as we're staying connected to the divine and grounded in our body, A person meets a person, and this it is, not the philosophic absolute, which all interior souls... Okay, I did that. It is obvious that where divine perfection is conceived as the soul's companion, the bridegroom, the beloved, the method of approach will be very different from that which ends in the self's immersion in the paradoxical splendor of the abyss, the still wilderness where no one is at home. That's quote. The still wilderness where no one is at home. It is all the difference between the preparations for a wedding and for an expedition of the Arctic seas. Hence we find at one end of the scale that extreme form of personal and intimate communion, preparations for a wedding, the going forth of lover to beloved, which the mystics call the orison of union. Oh, that's good to know, because she's been saying it this whole book. Now we know. See, sometimes it's better to listen to this, then you'll understand what she's talking about, because I didn't know from the beginning of the book till just now. The going forth of lover to beloved, which the mystics call the orison of union, and at the other end, the dark contemplation, like, an expedition to the Arctic seas, right? By which alone selves of the transcendent and impersonal type claim that they draw near to the unconditioned one, capital O, of the dim and ineffable contemplation of the unnamable transcendence, the imageless absorption in the absolute. Dionysius the Areopagite, I looked him up the other day, of course, provides the classic example. It was he who gave to it the name of divine darkness, and all later mystics of this type borrow their language from him. His direction upon the subject are singularly explicit. His descriptions, like those of St. Augustine, glow with an exultant sense of a reality attained, and which others may attain if they will but follow where he leads. Excuse me for 1 minute. Thanks. Quote, as for thee, now Dionysius the Areopagite, I think when I looked him up, he was from around the 300s. Or earlier. It could have, I don't know if it's actually, anyway, I won't go into it. As for thee, O well-beloved Timothy, he says, exercise thyself ceaselessly in mystical contemplation. That's so good to hear. It's like, yes, permission to exercise ourselves ceaselessly in mystical contemplation. That's like my dream, you know what I mean? I hope it's yours. Welcome, because we're doing 42 hours or 44 hours of it so far. Let's on our way to ceaseless mystical contemplation, right? As for thee, O well-beloved Timothy, he says, exercise thyself ceaselessly in mystical contemplation. Leave on one side the senses and the operations of the understanding, all that which is material and intellectual, all things which are and all things which are not, and with a supernatural flight, go and unite thyself as closely as possible with that which is above all essence and all idea. For it is only by means of this sincere, spontaneous, and entire surrender of thyself and all things that thou shalt be able to precipitate thyself free and unfettered into the mysterious radiance of the divine dark. End quote. Unfettered into the mysterious radiance of the divine dark. That's so beautiful. Mysterious radiance of the divine dark. We could write a song like that. The mysterious radiance, you know, I see the sun, right? Radiance of the divine dark. Look at that. That's so rad. I have been in California for a number of years now. Oh, I'm getting deja vu from the first video we did up here. The first video I made of this, I think was, it might have been at the where I roller skate, but yeah, may have been, but maybe one of the second ones was here. It's so weird because God is above time. So that's happening right now. That same video is being made in the eyes of God. It can be like that. Anyway. Again, the divine dark is naught else but that inaccessible light wherein the Lord is said to dwell. You know, there's that verse, and I love this, okay? So this is such a verse that can help you give yourself permission to stay in this contemplation as the saint. I think it's the Saint Dionysius the Areopagite, right? Is instructing Timothy. It says, it's a psalm, right? And the Psalms were inspired most often by David, by the Holy Spirit speaking through him. And it says, the Lord is in his holy temple. I think this is a psalm. If not, it's one of the prophets or something. Let the earth keep silence before him, right? The Lord, the I am, is in his holy temple. You are the temple of the living God. The Lord, the I am, is in his holy temple. It's beyond him or her. Is in divine love's holy temple. So that the earth, Adam was made out of the earth, you know, like this ground, Adam and Eve. And then Eve was taken out of his side, you know. Let the earth, let us, let our senses keep silent in awe, in absorbing the loving beingness of divine love, right? The I am is in his holy temple. That is in absolute infinite beingness, his holy temple. Let the earth keep silence. Keep it. It's protecting silence. It's like keeping guard, you know? Keep it, keep it, keep it. I've had moments where it's just like I never need to say another word the rest of my life. I was getting that the other day because with God a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. So I'm like, oh, I wondered what that was. There's a drone over there. I thought it was these bees. There's so many bees around me. Just a drone. Peace, drone. Okay, anyway, a day is like 1,000 years. 1,000 years is like a day. And so I was like, oh, so my life, even if it's only another 100 years or, you know, whatever, with, whatever, anyway, you know, or less, whatever it is, I could die today, I don't know. But then you won't be seeing this because I'm not going to post this today. Anyway, it was like, if 1,000 years is like a day, then my life is like nothing. It's like a couple days, you know, a few days. Hi. Bye. I'm making my own video. Bye. I'm talking to the drone. It's just staring me down now here. Anyway. Okay, so anyway, 1,000 years is like a day. Like we're withdrawing our senses from that, And so it was like, so what? So I live 50 to 100 more days. It would be okay if I didn't speak for 1/3 of a year, That's a good fast right there. I've probably said more than enough in my life already. Anyway, it took a lot of pressure off, because I make all these videos and sometimes I think I always have to be teaching and stuff. But apply this to your life. I'm only giving this as an example, not to be talking about me, because I honestly don't care to do that, but to give you, contemplations for your own life and to understand these mystic ways she's talking about. All right, I'll go back. For it is only by means of this sincere, spontaneous, and entire surrender of thyself, give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be la vie en rose. We'll always have a beautiful life. That's the first and second commandment. Because if we give our hearts and souls to God sincerely and spontaneously and in fullness, then of course we're going to be loving all people, because we don't need anything from any people. We don't need to be famous or not famous or well-liked or rich or poor or attached to anything. We just love because we're loving divine love with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, And out of that, we just have this abundance of love, right? And so that chorus of that song captures it, right? Okay, and so, for it is only by means of this sincere, spontaneous, and entire surrender of thyself and all things that thou shalt be able to precipitate thyself free and unfettered into the mysterious radiance of the divine dark. Again, the divine dark is naught else but that inaccessible light wherein the Lord is said to dwell. Although it is invisible because of its dazzling splendors, and unsearchable because the abundance of its supernatural brightness. Nevertheless, whosoever deserves to see and know God rests therein. I invite you to pray. Pray also that all people that come to this video, that God will open their spiritual eyes. Because you can't see these with natural eyes. It's a gift. Grace is like spiritual sunshine. And it's 33 minutes into this, right? 33 was when Christ died. God owns all the numbers, but it's something. And so, you can pray that. Thank you. I appreciate your prayers for everybody. Although it is invisible because of its dazzling splendors and unsearchable because of the abundance of its supernatural brightness, nevertheless, whosoever deserves to see and know God rests therein. And by the very fact that he neither sees nor knows, it is truly in that which surpasses all truth and all knowledge. It has become a commonplace with writers on mysticism to say that all subsequent contemplatives took from Dionysius this idea of divine darkness, and entrance therein as the soul's highest privilege, took it, so to speak, ready-made and on faith, and incorporated in their tradition. Like the cloud of unknowing is just like that. And the cloud of unknowing, I forget, 1500s, 1600s? I don't remember where it is, but it's exactly what he just wrote in either, the 40s AD to 300 AD, whenever he wrote that, it's like it could have been however many hundreds of years before. But it's because when you're a mystic and you go into these places, you see the reality. It's just like mathematicians all over the world can know that 2 + 2 is 4, and then other mathematicians can go, oh, well, if I have 4 apples and 4 apples, that equals 8. You know what I mean? It's like, hello. They act like it had to be said by this person first, and then everyone's copying. No, you have your own experience of maths. you know. Anyway, I'm like, welcome. It has become a commonplace with writers, so they say they took from Dionysius this idea of divine darkness, an entrance therein as the soul's highest privilege, took it, so to speak, ready-made and on faith and incorporated it in their tradition. But to argue thus is to forget that mystics are above all things practical people. They do not write for the purpose of handing on a philosophical scheme. I'm laughing because I have so many videos on, songs that I get, like the silliest songs. I have one that keeps coming to mind, but in my heart, I've been told, wait. If I have time, I'll tell you it's at the end. I hope I remember because it's so great. I love this song, and it keeps coming back, but I don't want to. Anyway, I'll create a buzz for later, right? It's like, but anyway, and so it's like, no, you're not doing it like out of propriety. Like, I love this quote about C.S. Lewis. I love Tolkien as well. Tolkien's essay on fairy stories, Tolkien and Lewis, is so good. But, someone said about Lewis, it's like he'll quote from, because he had a photographic memory, he'll quote from St. Augustine and Boethius and, all of these amazing people, and he'll quote from Squirrel Nutkin. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. We don't care. I'm not equating myself with them. I'm just saying because we want you to know this love. And it doesn't matter if it sounds intelligent or not. We want you to know this love because you're worth it. You're always worth it. Anyway, they do not write for the purpose of handing on a philosophical scheme, but in order to describe something which they have themselves experienced, something which they feel to be of transcendent importance for humanity. If my videos ever go viral, I want each of you here to come celebrate with me, either in person or online. Because all I want is this to go to everybody in the world so that they know this deep love, And it's like maybe 100 people will see this so far, but, it's in God's hands. Maybe in 100 years from now, 1 million people will see this because it's still around, right? It'll all be worth it. Even if you 100 people that see this have this deep, deep-rooted faith after this video, and your life changes, and the trajectory of your life changes to the highest love, like the sun, this highest love. The sun's just a representation of that. If you have depth, you're gonna laugh if I get to tell you this song because the word deep is in it, Ask me if I never get to it at the end, because sometimes I forget because I'm in this mindset. Anyway, it just makes me sad sometimes when I look with my physical eyes that only 100 people are getting this, or sometimes 200. Or some of my videos go out to like 600, or one of mine on Instagram went to 25,000, and that was beautiful. But it's not about the numbers, God is about depth, right? Depth in your soul. I'm so glad that God had me wait for this song. It's so funny that I just said depth of your soul. Okay. So, something which they feel to be of transcendent importance for humanity. If, therefore, they persist, and they do persist, in using the simile of darkness in describing their adventures in contemplation, it can only be because it fits the facts. Like I said, 4 + 4 = 8, right? Look at the butterfly just went by. It fits the facts. No Hegelian needs to be told that we shall need the addition of its opposite before we can hope to approach the truth. Where you use the opposite to express the truth. It's like the, synthesis, and whatever, antithesis, well, whatever. You say it, then the antithesis, and then synthesis. There's all these Plato dialectics and blah, blah, blah. Hegelian dialectics. Anyway, I can't remember the exact definition right now, but no Hegelian needs to be told that we shall need the addition of its opposite before we can hope to approach the truth, and it's exactly the opposite of this, quote, dim ignorance, which is offered us by mystics of the joyous or intimate type, who find their supreme satisfaction in the positive experience of union, the, quote, mystical marriage of the soul. What then do those who use this image of the dark really mean by it? They mean this, that God in his absolute reality is unknowable. It's like, I'll show you the ocean. Look, there's some ocean over here that doesn't have clouds on it, right? It's like if you were saying to a 7-year-old, I was just around, I think she's 7, the 7-year-old today. She may be 9, her brothers. Anyway, I was around her. And if we said to her, this is what the ocean is, it's a lot of salt water. It's like, no. The ocean has, the coral and all of the animals. And it would take me the whole rest of my life to describe all of the elements in the ocean. You know what I mean? All of the DNA that makes up everything in the ocean, and all of its ebbs and flows, and the coastal tides, and where the water goes and where the water comes from, and whatever. All of, it could take me the rest of my life. It would, you know what I mean? And so it's like, in that way, we can keep knowing about the ocean, right? And she can go jump in it and know it in that way as well. We can jump in God and know God by the negative, by the positive, by the personal, by the impersonal, by these experiences, by these songs, by other mystics, by your own experience. But it's like C.S. Lewis says, further up and further in the last battle, his last Narnia book. You're running further up and further in, You're always knowing more and more, higher love, higher consciousness. It's so beautiful. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Let's look at this. As the cloud layer burns away, No Hegelian, we said that. This dim ignorance, which is offered us by the mystics of the joyous or intimate type who find their supreme satisfaction in the positive experience of union, the mystical marriage of the soul. And it is exactly the opposite of this dim ignorance, which is offered by the mystics of the joyous or intimate type who find their supreme satisfaction in the positive experience of union and mystical marriage of the soul. Now, she has this quote on the other side, in a letter to Dorothy the deacon. Oh, good. See, here's another example of a deacon that was a woman. This passage seems to be the source of Vaughan's celebrated verse in, quote, The Night. He says, or she says, anyway. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. As men here say, it is late and dusky because they see not all clear. Oh, for that night, where I am in him, might live invisible and dim. Okay, so that's a quote. That's a poem that sounds just like what Dionysius the Areopagite said. I pulled on the headphones. Sorry if this is a little crooked. I can't. If I push it, then there. Okay. Okay, so what then do those who use this image of the dark really mean by it? They mean this, that God, in his absolute reality, is unknowable, is dark to man's intellect, which is, as Bergson has reminded us, adapted to very different purposes than those of divine intuition. When, under the spur of mystic love, the whole personality of man comes into contact with that reality, with a capital R, right? It enters a plane of experience to which none of the categories of this intellect apply. Reason finds itself, in a very actual sense, in the dark, immersed in the cloud of unknowing. Oh, I'm so glad I mentioned him. This dimness and lostness of the mind, then, is a necessary part of the mystic's ascent to the absolute. That absolute will not be, quote, known of the heart until we acknowledge that it is, quote, unknown of the intellect, and obey the Dionysian injunction, quote, to leave the operations of the understanding on one side, right? Enter into this artistic realm. Like I always quote Pavel Florensky, says, in creating a work of art, the artist goes into to this divine realm, and in getting the noumena of the thing, comes back and describes what they got in symbolic form in artistic expression, something like that. It's a beautiful quote. And so it's art is like waking dream. It's like you're describing this beautiful love that is there. Anyway, he was a physicist and philosopher and priest who died giving away his bread before in Siberia and had to leave a child and a wife. It's a sad story, but beautiful. He was a neo-martyr in the 1800s. Russian. Anyway, he lived in France for a little while, I think. Studied about Sophia, Lady of Wisdom, as told in the Psalms, not any occult thing. Anyway. Reason finds itself, reality, it enters a plane of experience which none of the categories of intellect apply. Reason finds itself, in a very actual sense, in the dark, immersed in the cloud of unknowing. This dimness and lostness of the mind, then, is a necessary part of the mystic's ascent to the absolute. That absolute will not be, quote, known of the heart until we acknowledge that it is unknown of the intellect and obey the Dionysian injunction to, quote, leave the operations of understanding on one side. The movement of this of the contemplative must be a movement of the whole man or woman, the whole person, human being. He is to precipitate himself free and unfettered into the bosom of reality. Only when he has thus transcended sight and knowledge can he be sure that he has also transcended the world with which they are competent to deal. And it is in that which surpasses all essence and all idea. And here's a quote. And it's in English, yes. Sometimes she doesn't have the translation, and she's like, this is the most beautiful poetry you've ever read on the expression of God. And we're like, wait, that's in Latin. And then she doesn't. But anyway, I encourage you guys before in the other videos, if you come across that and you know Latin, I usually show it on the screen because this is free copyright. So write it out for us in the comments, Do your good deed for the day, your good service. Besides watching this is good for your soul. That's why I make it. Quote, this is love, to fly heavenward, to rend every instant 100 veils, the first moment to renounce life, the last step to fare without feet, to regard this world as invisible, not to see what appears to oneself. End quote. That's from Jalaluddin. Selected poems from the Divan. I think that's like a Sufi poet. Like Rumi, I love Rumi. That was just a firework, I think. This acknowledgement of our intellectual ignorance, this humble surrender, and I was just thinking of Rumi when I was reading that, because he says, do not seek for love, but seek instead to remove all the barriers, like the veils, between yourself and love, right? That's what we're doing. We're just saying to God, burn it up in your sun, like those clouds burned up, right? Look. Those clouds, they're not there now, and they were. God is able to do that. Just entrust yourself to God. Ask God. And trust that in faith that he will do so. That God is beyond he and she, right? Because it says in the Psalm 27, it says, when my mother and father forsake me, the Lord lifts me. The I am lifts me up, right? God takes us into God's heart, right? Into God's heart. That's where I always know. Like people will go, no, God is a he. I'm like, okay, whatever. You can say so. I don't care. I know that God is my mother and my father because he gave me that verse. So anytime I feel forsaken in another person, in any man or woman on this earth, child or adult, usually never children, or animals, but that is my mother or father forsaking me because they're not loving the highest love. That is when I myself forsake myself, and I'm not a good mother or father to myself because I internalized less consciousness. The Lord, the I am, will even pick me up from myself and lift me to a higher place. That's what the Psalms give us. That's one verse, you guys. That's one verse. Psalm 27. It's like the second to the last verse of Psalm 27. I think it's Psalm 27. Or else we read Psalm 27 today and it's Psalm 25. Look it up. But it's there. You'll find it. It's in a lot of my other videos. Oh, my son's calling me. But he knows I can call him in 10 minutes. What a sweetheart. I hope you can still hear me while it just shows up. I forgot to put this on airplane mode. I have hearts next to his name so that I'm always like, no matter if I'm in a bad mood or whatever, just always loving towards him. Like, I recommend it. I mean, he's such a sweetheart anyway. They both are. Anyway, this acknowledgement of our intellectual ignorance, this humble surrender is the entrance into the cloud of unknowing, the first step towards mystical knowledge of the absolute. For truth and humility are full, true sisters. Nice, says Hilton. Fastened together in love and charity, there is no distance of counsel betwixt them two. Did you hear that? I hope you remember that. For truth and humility are full, true sisters, says Hilton, fastened together in love and charity, and there's no distance of counsel betwixt the two. I met an Orthodox monk who came here to California. My friend is Greek Orthodox. And he was at this small church of his, and he lives on Mount Sinai, where Moses got the 10 Commandments. There's a monastery there. I forgot what it's called. But he came all the way over here from there. And there were people, and I got to ask a question, and I was like, how do you climb Jacob's ladder? That's what came to my soul to ask him. This is maybe 15 years ago I asked this, right? Because I know how old one of my kids was around that time. And I still remember his answer because it puzzled me, because you want someone to just give you a straight answer. And I'm like, how do you can't, because Jacob saw a ladder of the angels going up and down to heaven, and both my kids, anyway, I won't say about that. But I'll say what his answer, he said, with humility. That's how you climb the ladder. And it's always stuck with me. And every time I go and try to climb it up really fast by some new spiritual sparkly thing, and I fall on my behind again, and hurt other people and hurt myself. I hope I never, ever do that again, never. I hope I've learned my lesson now, but I'm like, oh yeah, with humility. Pride comes before the fall, and then when you fall, it hurts, and you see how it hurts other people, and you never want to go back. It's just like that one video where I was reading in here, and she's like, no more sin, please God, no more sin. Because you never want to harm God's people or yourself, or, another reason for that nail to be put in Christ's arms, has hands and feet, and hang on that cross, not another sin for him to carry. You don't want that. Anyway. So, and there's a verse that says something like, love and charity have kissed each other. There's a psalm. It's like this, okay? So she says, or whoever's, Hilton, he says, it's a he. For truth and humility are full true sisters, says Hilton, fastened together in love and charity, and there is no distance of counsel betwixt them two. All right? Truth and humility, they go together. If someone doesn't have humility, not fake humility, if someone doesn't have true humility that's teaching you, then ask God what to do, because I've had to cut myself off from different teachers. And none of us are perfect. None of us. I'm not saying I'm perfect at all. There was a specific reason anyway. I don't talk bad about anybody. Anybody can turn at any moment. God can turn anyone at any moment to full truth and humility. I'm not saying I have the market of that, Thou askest me, quote, this is a quote, and sayest, says the author of the Cloud of Unknowing, how shall I think upon himself, and what is he? To this I cannot make thee other answer but thus, I wot not. W-O-T, not. I want not. Like I don't know, or I want nothing, or, quote, for thou hast brought me with thy question into that same darkness and cloud of unknowing, that I would thou wert in thyself. For of all other creatures and their works, and of God himself, a man may have full head of knowledge, and well of them think, but of God himself can no man think. Therefore I will leave all that I can think upon, and choose to my love that thing that I cannot think. And why? Because he may well be loved, but not thought on. By love he may be gotten and holden, but by thought never. Never. It's beyond thought. Ellipsis. Go up towards that thick cloud of unknowing with a sharp dart of longing love, and go not thence for anything that befall. So long, therefore, as the object of the mystic's contemplation is amendable to thought, is something which he can know, he may be quite sure that it is not the absolute, but only a partial image or symbol of the absolute, right? The sun is like a symbol of the absolute, but when you're knowing the sun, you're not knowing divine love, you're knowing a symbol of God, of divine love, of the radiance, this dark radiance. To find that final reality, he must enter into the, quote, cloud of unknowing. Jesus talked about that peace that passes all understanding, right? Must pass beyond the plane on which the intellect can work. It's beyond the mind. The mind is just an instrument, like a violin. It's an instrument that does computations. Your beingness and your consciousness and your soul is something, you can know something in your soul, like the knowing, that's so far beyond what your mind can know. Understand this. You see this in Scripture on the Mount of Transfiguration when Moses and Elijah are there, and it's the Feast of Booths, I think, right? And Peter says, shall I make a booth for you and for Moses and Elijah? And it says he said this not knowing how he said it. You know what I mean? And it's like because his mind didn't know, but you just see them and you have a knowing, oh, that's Moses, that's Elijah. Talked about that. You can have a knowing in that, and that's beyond your mind, It's like people that have near-death experiences can go up and see people. It's beyond this too. It's beyond your astral body if you want to understand it that way. But they see people praying for them in the chapel. They see the nurses. They see what they're wearing. They're brain dead on the machine, and they come back and they describe everything they saw and all the people that were praying for them. How is that? That's just a question I'll ask. But I'm not saying to go off on some dark rabbit holes because I've done that. Just keep trusting God and ask God to reveal it in a way that's safe. When I say darkness, says this same great mystic, I mean thereby a lack of knowing, and therefore it is not called a cloud of the air, but a cloud of unknowing, that is, between thee and thy God. End quote. The business of the contemplative, then, is to enter this cloud, the good dark, as Hilton calls it, the deliberate inhibition of thought, which takes place in the horizon of the quiet, is one of the ways in which this entrance is effected. Intellectual surrender or self-negation is another. Okay. Or self-knotting, you're knotting out yourself, is another. He who by dint of detachment and introversion enters the nothingness or the ground of the soul enters into the dark, a statement which seems simple enough until we try to realize what it means. Oh, where, says the bewildered disciple in one of Boehme's dialogues, is this naked ground of the soul void of all self? It has a capital S. And how shall I come at the hidden center where God dwelleth and not man? Tell me plainly, loving sir, where it is and how it is to be found of me and entered into. Master, there where the soul hath slain its own will and willeth no more anything as from itself. Disciple, but how shall I comprehend it? Master, if thou goest about to comprehend it, then it will fly away from thee. But if thou dost surrender thyself wholly up to it, then it will abide with thee and become the life of thy life and be natural to thee. It's kind of like just jumping into the ocean and trusting that you're going to float, like in the Dead Sea you do, I'm not saying to do that in a real ocean. I mean, our Pacific Ocean, you can't do that. The author of The Cloud of Unknowing is particularly explicit as to the sense of dimness and confusion which overwhelms the self when it first enters this dark. We're just wrapping up, right? A proceeding which is analogous with that annihilation of thought in the interest of passive receptivity which we have studied in the quiet. The first time thou dost it, he says, of the neophyte's first vague steps in contemplation, thou findest but a darkness, and as it were a cloud of unknowing, to wit, a dark mist, which seemeth to be between thee and the light that thou aspirest to, And thou knowest not, saving that thou feelest in thy will a certain naked intent unto God, that is, a certain imperfect and bare intent, as it showeth at the first sight, to come to a thing without convenient means to come to the thing intended. This cloud, howsoever thou work, is evermore between thee and thy God, and letteth to thee that thou mayest not see him clearly by light of understanding in thy reason, nor feel him by sweetness of love in thine affection. And therefore shape thyself to abide in this darkness so long as thou mayest evermore, crying after him whom thou lovest. For if ever thou shalt feel him or see him, in such sort as he may be seen or felt in this life, it behoveth always to be in this cloud and darkness." End quote. From the same century, but from a very different country and temperament, comes another testimony as to the supreme value of this dark contemplation of the divine, this absorption beyond the span of thought or emotion in the substance of all that is. It is one of the most vivid and detailed accounts of the strange form of consciousness which we possess, and deserve to be compared carefully with the statements of the cloud of unknowing and of St. John of the Cross. We owe it to that remarkable personality, the blessed Angela Foligno, who was converted from a life of worldliness to become not only a Christian and a Franciscan, but also a Platonist. Yes, Plato. In it, we seem to hear the voice of Plotinus speaking from the Vale of Spoleto. I'm just going to do the first couple sentences of this because I got to go too. "There was a time," she says, "when my soul was exalted to behold God with so much clearness that never before had I beheld him so distinctly. But love did I not see here so fully, rather did I lose that which I had before and was left without love. Afterwards did I see him darkly, and this darkness was the greatest blessing that could be imagined, and no thought could conceive aught that would equal this, ellipsis. And by that blessing, most certain and including also that darkness, have I attained unto all my hope, and inasmuch as now I see clearly, I have all that I desired to have or to know. Here likewise do I see all good, and seeing it, the soul cannot think that it will depart from it, or it from the good, or that in future it must ever leave the good. The soul delighteth unspeakably therein, yet it beholdeth not, which can be related by the tongue or imagined in the heart. It seeth nothing, yet seeth all things, because it beholdeth this good darkly. And the more darkly and secretly the good is seen, the more certain it is and excellent above all things. Wherefore is all other good which can be seen or imagined, doubtless, less than this, because all the rest is darkness. And even when the soul seeth the divine power, wisdom, and will of God, which I have seen most marvelously at other times, it is all the less than this most certain good, because this is the whole, and those other things are but part of the whole. Another difference is that, albeit those other things are unspeakable, yet they do bring great joy, which is felt even in the body." I'll have to go later and I'll end this now, because I usually start on this left side, so I'll probably reread that anyway. It just goes on for another paragraph. Okay, I wish you... Oh, wait, I was going to tell you this song, right? And maybe it was kept for me to say it at the end, because I might have to cut this end part out. If I do, then you know, ask me in the comments to put it, to name the song. You guys can look it up, because I can say the name of it first, actually, and before I sing it. But it was the Bee Gees of all people. But it's like, how deep is your love, right? If you listen to that song and act like, understand that divine love, that God is speaking to you, and you're speaking to divine love. He says, like, you know the door to my very soul. How deep is your love, and your love for me, your love for me. I really need to know that, because we're living in a world of fools, breaking us down, when they all should let us be. We belong to you and me. It's so beautiful when you start singing songs this way, because I ask God always to speak to me in everything. And so, it's not wrong. God is love. Any kind of derivative of that is of God, the good part. All right, I wish you so much love. Make sure to share and like and all that stuff. Share to 1 million people each, okay? If you can. I don't hold that to you. All right, much love.